just remember, it's just like you're on a journey, and take as many people on it with you that believe in the same things, and good things that happen, bad things will happen too.
Welcome to the Agency Profit Podcast, a show dedicated to going deep space on agency operations, which is just as nerdy as it sounds. I'm your host, Marcel Petitpas. I'm the CEO of Parakeeto, a firm that helps digital and creative agencies measure and improve their profitability. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and agency owners in our space and go deep into operations, metrics, and all the other things you need to get right so you can spend less time worrying about operations and more time executing on your vision. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Agency Profit Podcast. We have today joining us for the third time, I think the only person that's ever been on our show 3 times, friend of the show, friend of Marcel's, a great partner here at Parakeeto, the legendary Jason Swenk, a person that has built and sold agencies, has advised hundreds of agencies. He's one of the first people to ever really become a specialized advisor, coach, mastermind runner for agencies, and still today runs an excellent organization called Agency Mastery 360, which I've had the pleasure of being involved with. So with all of that, Jason, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule of snowboarding, mountain climbing to be here with us today to share your insight on how to go from entrepreneur to CEO.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for having me on the show again.
It's a pleasure, man. We always have time for you here at the Agency Profit Podcast. And I'm excited to dive in because what we're going to be talking about today is something that so many people listening are currently struggling with or are about to struggle with, which is that transition from being a founder-led organization and kind of being the business owner that started the agency to now having to make that leap to building managers, leading through people, and really becoming a CEO. And in our conversations pre-show, you have just this different way of framing that conversation. I think it's going to be eye-opening to folks. So before we dig into that, for those that aren't familiar with you, Jason, let's start with just kind of who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So Jason Swenk, I created an accidental agency in 1999 by designing a website, making fun of one of my friends that looked like Justin Timberlake called In Shit. Got popular. People started asking me to design websites, started at $500 websites, and then obviously, grew it to, a lot bigger than that, and sold that agency. And then for the past 10 years, been doing my own podcast called the Smart Agency Masterclass, where I interviewed you and other amazing agency people where we tell their story. And I've been doing agency mastery for a long time, and it's just a resource I wish I had when I was running my first agency.
And just to fill everybody in on the details, you are very humble, but that agency that you built worked with some massive clients, Lotus Cars, Hitachi, grew to 8 figures. So that was you really did it, and you went from entrepreneur to CEO of an organization with multiple layers of management. So that experience, now having translated to advising hundreds of other agencies on that same kind of path, I think is really, really precise to what it is that we're talking about today.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's I went from not even knowing what an invoice was, because my first client asked me to send him an invoice to get paid, and I'm like, what the hell is an invoice? I had to ask my dad because Google wasn't around. That's how old I am. So.
And I would love to, man, we had some there's earlier episodes where you talk about showing up to meetings with briefcases and just things that I couldn't even fathom because this is back in the early 90s.
I had a metal briefcase like James Bond.
You handcuffed it to your wrist. So with all of that, you've spent the last several years working with other agency founders, and you've helped many of them make this transition. I guess let's start with, what does it look like? What does it feel like to start rubbing up against the ceiling of what you can do as an entrepreneur running the business and not transitioning to more of that CEO mindset?
Well, I think it's very familiar with your agency wheel. I don't know what you call it, right? Like, what were you like in your program? We'll plug your program. Everyone go check it out, right? Where you're like, the owner does everything, and then you hire someone, and then you're constantly on this wheel. And so what people are asking, and a lot of times I was asking you, I was like, what do your guests listen for? And people are always listening for the how. How do I grow my agency? How to scale my agency? And you're asking the wrong question. The question should be is first, where do I want to take the agency? Right. And a lot of people don't have that clarity. I ran the first agency for maybe 6 years. We grew it to a multi-million-dollar, like maybe 2.5 million. And I was completely miserable. And I wanted to shut it down because I was still the entrepreneur. And I was asking that question, the how, but and I didn't know where I wanted to go. So I figured out where I wanted to go. And then I figured out the two who's. Who do I need to hire? And who do I need to become to be the CEO, to give me more freedom and to give my team more freedom? Because look, my team will admit it. Even now, I'm the chief distractor. I will distract the shit out of anybody on my team. I'll be like, oh, you're doing this? Oh, what about this? And come in and right. Like, I'll be like, how do we do this? And they're like, no, Jason, get the hell out of here. Right. I mean, you see my team operate. Like, they'll just push me to the side, be like, we'll figure it out.
So I think that first question, right, where do we want to take this, is such an important one, because most people just think more, bigger,
No.
more revenue, more people. And it coincides with those other two questions that you asked. Who else needs to be involved in the team for us to get there? And who do I need to become as the founder? And those are some pretty significant implications, especially if like you started the agency because you're a designer, you love design, or you're a web person and you love web. And now there's this question of like, is the identity that I have for myself, the thing I want to do every day, does that actually coincide with what I theoretically am trying to get the business to become, and what is required of the leader of that business? So talk a little bit more about how people get stuck, or what we need to consider if our objective is to, get to 8 figures in revenue, for example, and what that entails from a who you need to become.
Well, when you're deciding the where, it's not like you mentioned, it's not all about just growing revenue, right? There's many people in our mastermind or that we've helped over the years. I'm like, look, you've created something amazing. You know, why do you want to get to the 10 million in revenue? Well, it's just a number. Well, what can you not do now that you can do then? And they really can't answer that, right? And I'm like, why did you create this business? And they're like, well, I wanted more freedom. What is freedom to you? It's more time and, a little bit more money too. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, let's draft something around that. Like, everyone always mentions a lifestyle business. I think you should always build a lifestyle business. Build that whatever you want around you. Like, you have a blank canvas. So why don't you paint what you want rather than what you think other people want? And what other people want is not what you want. So when I got to that point where I wanted to quit my agency, and I took a job interview, and they asked me like, what do you want to do every day? What don't you never want to do ever again? And that allowed me to get clarity. But I first started focusing on what are the things I never want to do. I don't want to manage people. I don't want to hire people. I don't want to do sales. I don't want to do operation. I'm naming all the things in an agency, right? Like, well, what the hell are you going to do? I'll tell you that. I'll tell you the 5 roles that you need to do as a CEO, and when you get there. And then I'll tell you the disadvantage when you actually get there too, which you'll laugh at me and you'll disagree, but then you'll be like, when you hit that, you're like, yeah, you're right. But I listed all the things I didn't want to do. And then eventually I started thinking about, where do I want to take this? And at that time I was like, man, if I could create this company around everything I like, I want to have the opportunity to sell it one day. So what do I need to do? And then how do what type of clients do I need to take on? What service do I need to do for them in order to, right, like, be the most profitable, to be the most attractive to sell that agency? Now, that would have been totally different if I was saying, I just want to create a role for me where I just love it, or maybe turn it over to my employees, or, you run into some of these agencies like I call them the incubator agencies. I want to use my agency as a machine to create other businesses that I can sell, other products, other services, because I have such a good methodology and a process and we deliver such amazing results. I just want to do this. So then I can keep this marketing agency. Like VaynerMedia is a great example of that, of how it just builds other agencies. So you have to figure out the where. And then the who, the first who is like, who do I need to become? So there's really kind of 4 or 5 roles. You need to set the vision and communicate it to the team. So then they first know where you're going, because if your agency team is constantly coming to you to make decisions, well, first off, you might not have told them where you're going, or you may have the wrong team, or maybe you're crippling them because you don't let them make any decisions, right? So you got to think about that. Like, what's the vision? Where am I going? Who's the clients? What are we offering? The stuff that only we can decide, and then communicating that often. The second part is really building and coaching your leadership team only, not the whole team. When I transformed to the CEO, I felt more that I was working for my leadership team. They weren't working for me. I was working for them. How can I support them? How can I get them to the next level? How do I make them from a manager to a leader? Like, really asking those questions and figuring that out. The third was understanding the KPIs, hiring smart people like you guys, right? Because I was an idiot when it comes to spreadsheets. Like when you were talking at Elevate, I was like, oh my God, you're hurting my head. Like such brilliant work. But I'm so glad I hired people like you that understood the numbers, that can communicate it to some dummy person like me going, yeah, all right, good. Our margins were really good, right? We can hire this person, that kind of stuff. The next is building key relationships and really that no one else can do. And then being the face of the organization. You have to be the face. Too many people say, well, then I can't sell it. I'm like, no, that's horseshit. Like you can sell it. They're all going off what you believe and the things that you set up, but you have to put a face to a brand. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, that's. I think I've embraced that probably as much as you have as well. So it's really interesting because none of the things that you've just mentioned here in terms of who you need to become involve doing the work, involve being
absolutely
great
not.
at design, right? Being great at strategy, being like, right? These tactical skills. I think that that's the big departure that becomes really challenging for people is from an identity perspective, they've been rewarded for and have gotten to the point that they're at because of all these skills. And those are exactly the things that they need to let go of in order to step into this kind of next phase that is about, to your point, getting the right people in the organization, making sure they know what we're doing, and then supporting them and working for them and becoming a great leader. I'm very much in the middle of that process right now, as you know, and it's really, really difficult. So what are some of the things that you see people get stuck on when they reach this point and they're trying to make these transitions? What holds them back?
Couple things. They hire people that they have to manage, which if you think about, we're accidental agency owners, right? We knew how to do something cool. Someone offered us money. So we started doing it for them, right? We don't know how to manage shit, right? And we don't want to manage anybody, but we try to hire people that we have to manage. I can always find someone cheaper, faster, and better to just follow my instructions. So I want to hire people that can manage themselves, that can think, that we can be resourceful. I'm looking for the operators that are going to save me time. A bad operator is going to come in and they're going to create chaos and they're going to try to change everything. A good operator is going to come in, they're going to sit back, digest everything going on and going, you have 5 systems, Jason and Marcel. How do we make this down to 2? And then they're going to alleviate so much time from me, whether it be on the sales front, whether it be on the marketing front, the account management front. But here's the biggest holdup. Even after, you're listening to this show and you're like, I need to hire the right who, right? I know who I need to become, and you keep growing. But you're going to be like, no one knows as much as I do. No one's as good as me. And if you want to dissect that, why can you go into a sales meeting or a marketing meeting or an account meeting and then provide, strategy that no one else can? It's because of the stories that you know. So I'm going to give you a really easy way to transfer this information to your operators. If you think of your methodology, like our methodology at Agency Mastery is attract, convert, scale, so you can sell or have the opportunity to sell. So there's four parts. So if you look at your methodology and then look at the success stories that you've had or the problems people had. So if someone prospect comes to us or a client comes to us and says, I'm really struggling with lead generation. Well, I can go right to the story that I wrote down under this column for attract and going, David had that same problem. And here's what we did. Here's how they solved it. Here's the result. And they can tell that story. Or, let's say you came to us and you're like, man, I'm having a hard time. Like my sales cycle is over a month. Man, that's really a long time. Well, Jack, and I can go to the convert column. Well, Jack actually implemented a foot in the door strategy that we talk about. He's able to convert in a week and his conversion rate went up, and we can talk more about that. So I share those stories with the team until they can create their own stories. And then guess what? They're way better than I ever could be.
There's another underlying thing here that I've felt around hiring people that have to be managed. Even once we go through all of these things, like, okay, maybe we're constrained by cash and margins, assuming we solve that. Maybe we're just not great at spotting talent. So we solve for that. We get better at hiring process, et cetera. Maybe we're not great at onboarding and transferring these stories and clarifying our methodology. We solve for that. Then there's the question of, am I comfortable as the founder with not being the best at that thing anymore and letting go of that thing? Do I feel insecure now if I allow that person to teach me something? If I'm not bringing people in the organization that I feel like are, in a sense, below me? That's not necessarily the best language to use, but you get the idea. I've found that even myself, subconsciously, I've made decisions in the past that were based more on insecurity than anything else. And that's a nefarious little thing that's hard to spot sometimes.
It is. And I think that's because yourself and others, and even including me in the past, we associate. So when I sold my first agency, I was depressed after because I kept thinking I sold my identity. I sold who I was. I related myself to an agency owner, an entrepreneur, and I didn't have that business anymore. I didn't have that significance or that contribution, right? But I didn't sell the characteristics of being creative, innovative, like that kind of stuff. Like that's who I am, right? Not an agency owner. The other thing that happened to me, remember I told you in the very beginning, I said, when you achieve the CEO, you'll be, there's a gotcha there. Like there's something that you won't like only for a little bit. So when I was able to go from an owner to CEO, I would go into my creative meetings and they go, Jason, we're good. I go into the marketing meetings. I'm like, you need help? No, we're good. Go in the account meeting. Nope, I'm good. I'm like, son of a bitch. Like my team doesn't need me anymore. And that was true. My team didn't need me for the things I used to do. It needed me to do the things that no one else could do. And so when I realized that, then I was like, okay, I found my calling again, right? And then I switched my focus because my goal is always to be the dumbest person in the room when I'm hiring people. I want people to outthink me, outwork me, be more creative, be more innovative, all that, but also stay humble. That's the big thing. Like, but I have no problem now of going like, I mean, you've seen it, like when you came to the Elevate last year, right? you're like, man, Stacy and Darby are incredible. Like everyone always talks about Stacy and Darby. Hardly ever talk about me at the event, right? Fantastic. I am perfectly fine with that because I want to create a business that I love, but I don't need to be in it 1,000%.
Do you want some free resources to help you measure and improve your profitability? If you do, then I want to tell you about our agency profitability toolkit, which you can grab absolutely free in the show notes or by heading to parakeeto.com/toolkit. It's packed with training videos, cheat sheets, templates, and all kinds of other great resources to help you start measuring and improving the essential metrics that are going to drive better profitability in your business. And it's helped thousands of other agencies around the world do the same. So I want to encourage you to go and grab a copy of that. And if you'd rather get in the fast lane and just have our team of experts guide you through the process of measuring and improving your profitability, then I want to encourage you to apply for a consultation at parakeeto.com. And with that, I want to thank you again for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the episode, and I'll let you get back to it. Yeah, now you mentioned something that's really interesting there, right? Which is like, okay, yeah, you have to let go of this identity and all of the things that you are getting positive feedback from, all the value and contribution you have to the business in order to find this next one. And so two things that are hard about that, the grieving of, okay, letting go of this part of, who I felt I was before and what I was doing. And then the next thing is the discomfort of saying, I now need to develop into the leader that the business needs now, which is a different set of skills that most of us have not developed naturally through our career, especially if we came up in a creative discipline and started a business. So let's talk a little bit about what that transition looks like as we start to get these people in place, how we then step into this role of CEO and what that entails.
Well, everything big starts off small. So we're not born with all the knowledge we have today. It takes a lot of missteps, grenades that you're blowing up in your face, mistakes, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I can't tell you how many mistakes I've made. There's millions and billions of mistakes, but it's all about figuring out and really kind of debriefing from everything that goes wrong in order to get there. Because when looking back, when I sold the agency, I sold it because I felt like I reached the cap for my cap. And right, like I became the CEO, and then I was like, that's my max. That's all I know. But looking back, I was like, for all the stuff I've learned, a decade later, I'm like, man, I could have grown that more than 10 times that with all the stuff I know. And so you just got to kind of take all the little things and not be afraid of it and just go in some direction, because there's not a clear path. There's not a silver bullet, right? There is, like, you climbing the mountain is like, if you're listening to the audio, my hands are going everywhere, right? Like, you just can imagine like zigzag, like you're almost to the top of the summit and then you fall all the way back down. And then you get back to the summit and then you're like, all right, what's the next mountain I need to climb? Like, that's all business is. And if you don't like problem solving, you're in the wrong type of business. Like, that's the fun part. And honestly, too, everyone always thinks about selling's my ultimate goal for most, like probably 80% of people. When they come to you, they're probably, I need to get the books in order so I can sell one day. But, honestly, I enjoyed, like, even after I sold the agency, looking back, I remember all the stories and the war, the war scars of losing, an arm or finger or toe, whatever it was, right? Like with my team, like that's what I remember and I miss. That's why I created this business and creating another team, because I missed that. And so just remember, it's just like you're on a journey, and take as many people on it with you that believe in the same things, and good things that happen, bad things will happen too.
Yeah, that is the truth. It's one of those ironic things about entrepreneurship is that like the reward for success is generally bigger, more complex challenges that you need to then solve to go to that next level. And that's kind of the blessing and the curse of it, right? Is like a video game. Every time you beat the first level, you get to the next level, and that next level is just a little bit harder.
Yeah.
And it requires a lot of discipline and constantly reinventing yourself.
Yeah, I mean, when we onboard new members, I always tell them, solve your biggest challenge, but that's going to create another problem for you, which you just need to be aware of. And then we'll solve that one together, and so on and so on and so on. It's just like kicking the can down the road. And that's why you got to kind of love the journey and the people that's with you on it. But I wouldn't trade this for the world.
So we've talked about 3 levels of this reframing on how to go from founder to CEO. We talked about clarifying where you want to take the business. And there's utility in that. It sounds like both for clarifying what we want out of the business and what the requirements are, and then reverse engineering from that, how we communicate that to our team, who we need to bring into the business, and who we need to become to support the business at that level. The one we haven't dug into a whole lot is the who, right? So we've established where we want to go. We understand what we are going to need to do and who we're going to need to become. And then we touched a little bit on the team, but I'd love to talk a little bit more about how you think about this challenge of finding people that don't need a whole lot of management, that are going to have all these qualities that you spoke about earlier, and that you've managed to bring into both your companies. What is your take on how to filter for those kinds of personalities?
Yeah, well, and look, I don't have it mastered either, but I've found some really amazing talent over the years. Like I was telling Marcel before, like I've been struggling finding the marketing person for a long time. That's been my Achilles heel. But finding someone that is a strategist and running operations, I've nailed it down, right? So it's all about thinking about what are the skills that you're the weakest at first. So many people say you should work on your biggest weakness. I'm like, no, you should hire for your biggest weakness. And then you have to figure out what you believe in. And what I say about that is, what are your core values? Like what makes you tick? Like what are your standards? Right? Because too many people I see, they're trying to find their twin. If I could just duplicate myself, is be perfect. I'm like, no, that would be a complete train wreck. You'd never get any work done because you distract everyone and then they would distract everyone and it's a bunch of distractors, right? You want to find your opposite, but that believes and has the same values, right? Like Simon Sinek did a great video everyone should check out. I think it's like Start With Why. I think he has a book too, but he talks about like Martin Luther King when he had the I had a dream speech, right? Like in the, what was it, in the 60s? I wasn't around then. I'm not that old. I know you're going to comment on that, Marcel. But like without social media, he got what, 100,000 people out there. Well, they didn't come out because they liked Martin Luther King. They came out because they believed in what he believed in. So if you start thinking about your core values, right? Like, so my core values is this. I want to be innovative. I want to be resourceful. I want to think about like there are many other ways to do things. I want to share my wins. I want to share my failures, right? So I started writing down all my core values. Then I started thinking about my North Star, going back to the where, right? My where, and I kind of alluded to this, is creating a resource I wish I had when I was running my first agency. So then that gives power to your team in order to make decisions for what's best for the agency, not what's best for them. Perfect example, we were writing an article many years ago and Stacy listed 10 conferences for agency owners to go to. I said 2 of them take off. She's like, why did it take off? Oh, I don't like them. You don't like them because they didn't ask you to speak at their event? I said, yes. Goes, well, are they a good event? I'm like, I'm sure they're. She's like, can we put them back in? I was like, yes. Right. So like you give that reason to them. Then you put out a bunch of mousetraps, and I'm going to save you guys a ton of time in your interview process. So think about what you're going to do, Marcel, right? When you're looking for, what type of role are you trying to hire right now? Like what role would you like to hire to be an operator for you?
Our next hire will probably be a marketing hire.
Okay. Achilles heel, but right. Bastard. But let's
do ops. Let's do ops.
No, we do marketing. Marketing's fine.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what role. I'm just laughing because I'm still struggling on hiring a marketing person. So, but I admit it, right? I'm not going to be a hypocrite, but this process will work. So what do? We go to Indeed, we go to LinkedIn, we post the job posting, right? And then how many resumes do you get in your hopper? Like 100, 200?
Hundreds, thousands.
Thousands, right? And then what do you try to do? You have someone from your team, or you're going through all these profiles and you're like, this is hard. Well, there's a catch-22 on this too. It's kind of funny. And we were talking about this in the mastermind. You're going to put out a couple mousetraps. So what I do is I will say, do not apply at the very bottom of the job description on Indeed or LinkedIn. Do not apply here. You must email your resume and a video under 3 minutes to this email address with the subject line, I actually read your instructions. So what will happen is those thousands of people that applied, 30 will email you. Now, out of the 30 that email you, 20 will put that in the subject line. So you could delete the other 10. Out of the 20 that has it in the subject line, probably 10 will only have the video. Out of that 10, 5 will only have, or they will followed all the instructions. It's under 3 minutes. So you created all these mousetraps. So then you can actually evaluate them. Now, the catch-22 here is, and I had a mastermind member tell me this, like, I'm not getting enough people to do it. Like, what do I do? I need to go back through the resumes. I'm like, you're hiring, like, let's say you're hiring a marketing person, you want attention to detail, right? Same thing with an ops person. I'm like, so you're telling me you're going to go back to these people that didn't follow your instructions in the dating phase, and you're going to ask them to marry you? And you're going to expect them to do something different? And they're like, well, what do we do? I'm like, well, you got to increase the number of people coming in to applying. Don't sacrifice your standards, because you're going to hire a bunch of idiots. So that will save you hundreds of hours.
And I can attest to this because we call it a tripwire, mousetrap, another good analogy for it. And man, it works. It saves us hundreds of interviews, a lot of combing through resumes. And, I think the important thing that you've highlighted here is working backwards from company standards and then working backwards from the skills that we're looking for in that job and trying to create a tripwire that will test for that thing. And it's super effective. Like, so for the sales role, the video was a big thing. And then the first set of interviews we did were asynchronous video interviews. So we didn't have to schedule anything. Like, it was way quicker. Yep. And man, it filtered so many people out so quickly and in such an efficient way. And it really lets the cream rise to the top. It's just pull the proof forward.
And then let's dive a step further for when you're interviewing people. So you're hiring for a marketing person. I got this question from one of our mastermind members. You met her, Audra. So they always ask this on the question, and I love it for a marketing person. So you got to think about these questions that will make each of these roles a step. So let's say I'm hiring you, Marcel. Let's say I hire you, and on day 1, I'm going to give you a gift. I'm going to gift you a real elephant. Now, you can't sell the elephant. You can't eat the elephant because I don't want PETA after me, right? What do? Right? And so then, like, for a marketing person, you want them to be creative, right? What do you want the marketing person to do? Want to reach more people. So how can I leverage this? And you'll tell what different types of people there are. So if you ask that question to me, I'd be like, man, I'm going to see how I'm going to make money off this. Like, I'm going to take all the shit that this elephant creates. I'm going to put it, like, I'm going to create a website to send shit to people that other people want to send shit to, right? Like, I bet I can make a lot of money doing that. Like, that's how my mind works. Now, a marketing person, I'm a sick person too, right? Like, I'd love to send my neighbors a bag of shit from this elephant, right? But a marketing person is going to be like, I'm going to create an Instagram account for this elephant, and I'm going to see how I can market this, right? Like, that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Yeah. That's such a funny question. Also, the way your mind works, also just so funny. Because you're right, it totally would work. Like, there's a guy Justin, that it was on the podcast a long time ago. He built this website where he would collect trash from the streets of New York and then sell it in like a clear plastic cube, and he made a ton of money selling trash on the internet. So great minds think alike.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a great question. It's really interesting how it's just such a far-fetched situation. And so it really kind of creates this blank slate to say, how does this person's mind work? Where do they go with this?
Yeah. And you're just, and it's not, just don't do the boilerplate questions either. Like really put them through, like, and I truly believe in all hires, you should hire as a consultant for 90 days before you hire full time. Especially like if it was an ops person. Because how are like, and I'm always honest with people too. Like my mind is a creative person. So when it comes to operations or numbers, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I would tell the interview, I'd be like, look, I don't know what I'm doing around ops. Here's my challenges, right? I need someone to execute and to really challenge me and hold me back and really get me focused. So let's do a 90-day project. You pick the 90-day project. What does that look like? What does that plan look like over 90 days to have a success plan? Like you pitch it to me, and then I'm measuring you off that because I'm not an operations person. So how am I going to put a job to, like, how am I going to rate you on an operations person? I'm only going to rate you over the 90 days about how did this person save me time? How did this person streamline? And how did they work with my existing team? Right? Same thing on a marketing front. All right, cool. How are they going to build the right foundation to attract leads? Or in sales, how are they going to create the right assets and the right conversations in order to move forward? Like, and I'm just measuring them off the 90-day plan that they put together in the very beginning.
I think this is a big shift to this way of thinking about hiring, especially when you're talking about building those leaders within the company. Because I think up until this point that we framed this whole interview around, which is kind of hitting that ceiling as the founder, you've probably been hiring people to do things that you've told them how to do, or that you're giving them a process. And this is where we're shifting from now somebody else's job is to figure out the how.
Yeah. If you constantly keep thinking, how do I need to do something? That's the wrong question. You go back to the where, who, and who. That's it.
So Jason, we could continue to talk for a very long time. And I'm sure that we will continue to talk for a very long time off of this podcast episode. But for those that are listening, if they want to get more into your world, they want to hear more of the content that you put out into the world, or maybe they want to explore joining Agency Mastery 360, which I highly recommend. It's an incredible community of other agency founders led by Jason and his team. It's a great mastermind, a great resource. Where should we send people in the show notes to learn more about all the stuff that you're doing?
You just got to swank it. And just go to the URL swank.it. And there's some free resources there for you. I want to gift you guys, from whether it be figuring out how to get more leads and better clients, whether it be to, building a sales team and converting more, or is it about how do I build operations and really scale to the next level so you can kind of find that clarity and that confidence to really lead beyond the day-to-day operations. If you go to swank.it and spelled SWENK.it, it will take you to the free advanced training for agencies. And if you want to come out, hang out with Marcel and I in February, I'm doing a small agency owner event. It's 40 agencies that will be vetted to come out to Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, when I know you're going to be happy about it because you'll get out of the snow and the cold into this nice desert, but it's all inclusive event where you'll be surrounded by amazing agency owners, where we can show you really how to get out of the day-to-day operations and create more time and freedom. So go to swank.it.
Awesome. So we will leave links in the show notes to swank.it. We'll leave a link to Jason's great podcast, which I highly recommend you subscribe to if you haven't already, and a link to Agency Mastery's event, Elevate, in Arizona, where I will be there hanging out for a couple of days. I'll be speaking. I'd love to see you all there. So scroll down. That'll be in the show notes for you. With that, Jason, any final words of advice for those that are listening at home?
Just remember focus, because we can get really distracted. And focus means finish one commitment until success, if you spell it out. and and pick the biggest impact item and just focus on that until you have success, and then move on to the next.
Wise words. Jason, I appreciate you being here with us. Thanks for the time.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've ever found yourself thinking, man, I get so much value from this podcast, I wish there was something I could do to return the favor. Well, today's your lucky day, because you can leave us a review wherever you're listening to this, and it is incredibly helpful. Of course, if you haven't grabbed a free copy of the Agency Profit Toolkit, go and get that. It's got tons of free resources to help you improve your profitability. If you're looking to get in the fast lane and get help from experts to improve your profitability and measure your most important metrics, then apply for a consultation at Parakeeto.com. We'd love to chat with you and figure out how we can help. With all of that, thank you so much for being a listener, and we will see you on the next episode.